Pretty? Alright.
Yeah, well, I was about 11 years old when everything started, 1940? 1940.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. You were born when?
97.
90?
97.
97. So it's been a long time. So at 9 years old, 11 years old that I was, it's very hard to remember everything. But I remember the worst things that happened during that time. Yeah, I was in grammar school. I was grade 5, I guess, when that happened, when the Italians invaded Greece. And I remember very well, every morning we used to go to school, our teacher used to tell us all the news of what's going on in the front. When they were fighting against the Italians. And it was mostly good news. Mostly was good news, because the Greeks were pushing the Italians back. They invaded Greece without notice. And they lost a couple battles. But then, although the Italians were a lot of bigger power than Greece, they had more machinery and more weapons than the Greeks had. The Greeks had a couple of airplanes, that's all they had. And they pushed them back to a point that the Germans had to help them out. You know what I mean? Now, in a month, my own brother was in the army. He died within a month. What that means that when the Italians moved into Greece until my brother died, it was only a month, right? And my brother died almost in the middle of Albania. You know what that means? How fast they were thrown back out of our country.
Yeah.
That is true. You can read it in any book. Any historian, Greek or non-Greek. Not because I favor the Greeks. The whole month makes a hell of a difference. That's how the Russians, they were almost ready to surrender because they were at Moscow. And the winter saved them. The winter saved them and pushed them back and stopped the end of the war started then. The Russians lost millions of people. There lost millions of people there. The main thing was hunger. People were starving. Because Greece at that time, it was a very poor country. Like it is now. But, everything that we had, it was taken by the Germans to feed their own country. And there was nothing left for the Greeks. So people who were starving, people who were dying on the streets and screaming, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, like I was saying to your father. And, it was, we think that 1940 to 1945, it's not such a long time. That's what we think today. But for us that we lived through, we thought it was like a century. There was never an end. There was no end to the occupancy of foreign powers, So we had a very hard time. We were starving to death. We had very little to eat. And being young as I was, usually at that age is when you have the greatest appetite, right? Yeah. But not we're not like in that respect. That's why I'm so short. I never grew properly. Yes, it was a very hard time, and the Germans were, they did some atrocities. If you kill a German, 50 of you are going to die. And it happened many times, in many places throughout Greece. They burned some villages to the ground, young and babies and old and everything. And I never told you that, but that happened throughout Greece. Because as soon as they came in, as soon as they took over, the resistance started right away too. People went up in arms, they went up to the mountains, they created resistance, and they were trying to sabotage everything they could. Yeah. And naturally, they had to, like an occupying force, retaliated. So 4 years, it was a long time, 41 to 45. It was 4 full years. When it was over, when everything was, when all the powers got together, the English and the Americans and the Russians, and they got together and make sure that the war was over, then we started a revolution of our own between leftists and rightists. People get involved and didn't know that they were involved. Like my own brother, when he was a young man then, he was about 17, and he wanted to join the resistance to fight against the Germans. And he did. Theospiro. He went to the resistance, only he got sick very soon and he had to come back home. But the reasons that he joined the resistance was purely patriotic. He wanted to help the liberation of Greece, like many people did at the time, you know. And they didn't know that those people that they started the resistance were of the leftists. No, they were leftists. They didn't know. People went as patriots. But at the end, they showed their real purpose. They were communists. And the party, or the largest group of the resistance, were the Communist Party, as it proved to be later on. And a lot of people were just entitled to this situation without knowing. The reason they left was because, and this is not because I witnessed it, because I read it in the papers and I read it in books that I've read. The delay they had fighting the Greeks, both Germany and Italy, was the salvation of the Soviet Union. You know why? They wasted a whole month against the Greeks that they were not counting on, because they thought they just going to walk in and pass through. But they lost a whole month, and that whole month called the defeat of Germany in Russia. Because by the time they were there, the weather was so severe that most of them froze. They almost defeated Russia, but because of the winter, because they had so many casualties of freezing soldiers and freezing machinery and everything. That's what turned, changed the war, changed the direction of the war. They were almost there. They were almost in Moscow, the Germans, and the defeat started right there. But what else you want to know?
How about like right when Greece was like right when they were liberated, what was happening? Like if there was like, I don't know, parties or something like that in the streets, parades.
Oh, that I remember.
Yeah.
That I remember because I was 15 years old.
Mm.
I was 15 years old, and I remember that. I started to listen to radio. I started to, have conversations about the war and about the ending of the war and everything. And I remember very well when the Germans came to Greece. A lot of our army fled with the king, and they went to Egypt, where there was, the English were there because Egypt was an English colony then. And they were there cooperating with the English and everything. And I still remember a great battle that that took place. I'm not sure where, but I remember the name, called El Alamein. El Alamein. I don't know where it is. Was it Libya? Was it Egypt? Was it? I don't know where it was, but it was a big battle there, and the Greek soldiers took part in that battle. And I remember that. And when they were coming back, when the war was over, and the soldiers from Egypt was coming back. They came back to Greece, and I was in Piraeus myself. I was where watching them coming in, and I started crying when I saw all the soldiers. Not only because they were liberated from Greece, but I remember my brother. And my brother that died in the war, and he wasn't among them. Yeah, I remember that.